Hello, everyone, and welcome to an exciting edition of Faith Chats. I'm your host, Andrew Burnett, and today I have with me none other than the Rob Novell of Charles Novell School of Music. How are you doing today, Rob?
Man, Andrew, I'm good. Thank you, buddy, for having me on today. I've been looking forward to this, so thank you.
I am so excited to have you on. So, to start off the conversation, share with us a little bit about the background of Charles Novell School of Music and where you all started.
Okay. That's easy. It's a passion of mine. I love this school. I've grown up in this school, so I love sharing kind of how we got to where we are. So it started in 1962. My dad, our background is Cleveland Church of God. And in 1962, the Church of God had their first ever what was known as Teen Talent program, which still continues and still happens today. And my dad was a 19-year-old from Virginia, and he won the state of Virginia, and he went to Memphis, Tennessee, to Ellis Auditorium at the General Assembly of the Church of God that summer, and played in the very first ever Teen Talent competition. And he got done playing. He got a standing ovation, and the head judge stood up and asked him to come out and play a second song. And that gentleman's name was A.T. Humphreys. He worked at Lee, but he also worked in the Blackwood Brothers organization. So he left that teen talent setting in Memphis, went back to Dallas, Texas, and talked up this young 19-year-old piano player. And 2 weeks later, my dad was in Virginia, got a phone call, answered the phone, and he said, hello. And the voice on the other end said, may I talk to Charles Novell? My dad said, this is Charles. And that other voice said, Charles, this is James Blackwood. I understand you're quite the pianist. And on that phone call, James hired my father as the dean, or I'm sorry, hired my dad as a teacher at then the Stamps Conservatory of Music. And so my dad started teaching in 62. And by mid 70s, my dad became the dean of the school. Followed a gentleman by the name of Don Butler. Don started the GMAs and the Dove Awards, and my dad followed him as the dean of the school. And back then, it was the Blackwood Brothers, J.D. Sumner and the Stamps, and the Spear family that we were all together in one school. And 1977, we had a school, and the school was 3 weeks long back then. We had a school in June of 77, and then uh, that summer, Elvis passed away, and JD Sumner owned the school. He was, connected with Elvis. They were his backup group for all those years there at the end. And there was no school in 1978. And my dad got a phone call in 1978, and it was JD. And JD said, Charles, I've kind of lost the drive for the school, but God's telling me you're the guy to keep this thing moving forward. So JD Sumner gave my dad the school in 1978, offered him the name Stamps Baxter, but dad went a different direction with things. So in 1979, we had a school. My dad actually partnered with Cecil Blackwood at that time, and we ran with Cecil for a while. And then um, in 1986, dad totally took the school on his own direction. We've had a couple different names, but we've gone by the Charles Novell School of Music for the last 23 years.
So, many may or may not know that you're a producer and arranger too. So, share with us how you got into gospel music.
Yeah, so I grew up in Ohio, north of Cincinnati, and in the late 70s, early 80s, honestly, gospel music was going through Cincinnati. There was a place in town there called QCA, Queen City Albums, and my dad was the house producer at Queen City, producing for at that time the Hopper Brothers and Connie, Blue Ridge, Naomi and the Seagos, J.D. Sumner and the Stamps, and Blue Ridge Quartet came through there. And so I literally spent every Saturday, every weekend of my life growing up in the studio with my dad. And I don't know if my dad, Andrew, I don't know if my dad wanted me there to kind of be exposed to everything, or my mom wanted me there so I wasn't around her. I don't know. But I spent every weekend in the studios, and I remember just kind of looking through the glass out at the musicians, and I'm like, I want to do that one day. And when I was 13, I started playing bass guitar on all of those sessions that my dad was producing. And learned with some of the greats there in the Cincinnati area. And even back then, guys were driving up from Nashville to be part of these recordings. And so I learned the number system and how to play in the studio and that type of thing when I was 13. And then fast forward, I went on the road with a group called Perfect Heart. Early 90s was with on the road with them with that's Jeff Stice, and I got to play with Jeff, my big brother, every night for 4 years, and came off the road in 95. And behind me, I'm in my studio here. My dad and I started Counterpoint recording and Counterpoint Music Group. And so that's kind of how I got my feet wet with that. And just been blessed to play on a lot of neat and great projects through the years with different groups. And I absolutely love this side of what we do, getting to work with artists and help them take their ideas and bring it into focus and let them hear. Love working with songwriters. I do a lot of demos for songwriters. Songwriting is a big part of CNS, so just love getting to be on the creative side of things in the studio.
As I'm sure your dad was one of your biggest gospel music influences, who were some of those that really inspired you to impact you to who you are today?
That's an easy and hard question, Andrew. I grew up in the school. Guys like James Blackwood, J.D. Sumner, Ben, Brock Spear, they were like uncles to me. JD spent more than one night at our home growing up, and he would always get my bedroom. I would kind of get shoved aside because JD would need to stay in my room. And so many influences on that level of guys that I looked up to. But if we get it really real into that mentor phase of things, I have to start with Billy Blackwood. I've literally I just turned 55. I have not known life without a Billy Blackwood in it. He's been in my life my entire life, and he has spoken to me spiritually, personally, musically. He's just been a big voice in my life. But then I look at some of the instructors that I had as a student growing up in this school. Um, my first bass guitar teacher was Steve Spear. And then from there, I went to John Mays. John produced for Word through all those years. He runs Centricity Music now. He's the guy that found Lauren Daigle. Um, he was my second teacher. My third teacher was a guy by the name of Mark Birchfield. Mark married Wanda Vick. They have the Watershed Studio there in Nashville. Just so I had so many great one-on-one influences through the school. But the game changer for me was 1982. My dad got a call from London, Paris. London taught bass for us at the school at that time. And London said, Charles, I've got a young piano player that you need to hear. And that was Jeff Stice. And in 1982, I walked into a private lesson room to take piano from Jeff Stice. Didn't know who Jeff was, but I met Jeff Stice as a 12-year-old piano student. And it was in that setting that things changed. I met a friend. I met a big brother. I met someone that quickly became part of the music school family, but very quickly became part of the Novell family. My dad was a mentor to Jeff, and then Jeff became a mentor to me. So to keep it real simple, Billy Blackwood, Jeff Stice, and then there's a third. There was a family involved in the school as I grew up in it, the Northams out of Texas, and Bruce and Connie Northam, and they had a family group. There were two groups out of Texas: the Northam brothers and then the Watts sisters. The Watts sisters had Sharon, Lisa, and Connie. Sharon ended up singing with the Hoppers. Through the Air with Greg Bentley, where then I met the Master. That was a big song for Sharon. Lisa ended up marrying Tony Turner of Mid South, and so the Northern family, specifically Bruce, was a big influence on me as well.
Wow. So being able to spend time with people like J.D. Sumner and Ben Spear and those that you've listed, what was a piece of advice that they given you that will forever stick to the forefront of your mind?
Um, it's bigger than the music. This is about I'll give you a specific, but a generalization of all those names that you mentioned. Man, they modeled to me and they taught me that, man, our skill sets, Andrew, are just our gift from God. But what we do with those gifts that and those talents, that's our gift back to God. This is bigger than us. This isn't just something we do just to get the music out of us. This is something that we do in the name of ministry. And this is something that we do to encourage people, motivate people, but most importantly, man, we're trying to get someone to surrender their life to the Lord. So I think I took on a sense of responsibility to do what I was called to do. It's just bigger than walking out on a stage. Uh, Personally, I remember a conversation I had with Brock Spear. In addition to our school, I taught at the Stamps Baxter School for a couple years. I followed James Gordon Freeze was bass guitar instructor there. Neat story. My first year teaching there, my first student walks in the room, and he was expecting James Freeze to be there. And at the last second, James had a commitment, couldn't be there. So Ben Spear called me and asked me if I could come teach. I was with Perfect Heart at that time, and Ben called and asked me if I'd come out there. And so this first student walked in and he looked at me and said, "Novell, any relation to Charles Novell?" I said, "Yeah, that's my dad." And he said, "Your dad produced 3 or 4 projects for my dad at QCA, the studio I mentioned to you. My dad's name was Dan Clark. The student was Jason Clark. It's the first day I met Jason, and he then came to our school the next year. The second student walked in, and a young man from Alabama. It was Adam Borden. So back to back in the same hour is when I met Jason Clark, and then I met Adam Borden. And but I was at Stamps Baxter. I had to leave to do a session. I came back in. Brock Spear saw me walking in and with my bass, and he said, "Hey, Robbie, sit down." He said, "Where are you coming from?" And I told him, and he said, "You know what?" And this encouraged me musically. He said, "You know what, Robbie?" He said, "We've gotten lazy in the recording world. We know we can go in and fix it, punch in, repair it." He said, when the family first started recording, we'd go into radio stations. They literally would cut the recording into the grooves of the album. And he said, we had to be prepared. So he told me, he said, "Robbie, you play like you practice. So when you go in for those settings, be prepared."
Well, so as you know, we tragically lost the Nealons just a couple weeks ago. Share with us a little bit about your favorite memory of the Nealons or Jason Clark.
Oh wow. That's a lot. I never traveled with the Nealons. I played 3 or 4 quartet conventions with them. I sat in and played bass guitar with them. And one cool moment, I was at NQC the first night that they brought Autumn out to start singing with them, and man, she took that room over. There's a gift, there's a call on her life. I'm seeing all the questions and speculations, and look, it's not for any of us to decide what her future is. God has a plan for her life, and as weird and crazy as this is, all of this is part of that plan. But I believe there's a call on that young lady's life. I do believe that because I was standing on stage that first night. But probably, um, Andrew, probably lots of memories. But Sunday night of CNS, we went July 14th through the 20th this year, and on Sunday night the 14th, we kicked the school off with the Hoppers. We brought the Hoppers in for our kickoff concert, and during the concert, I posted pictures of the Hoppers on stage singing and just said what a special night. And I just set the tone for a great week that we had. And Jason Clark responded with a picture, no verbiage, no text, no words. He just sent a picture that was a skeleton covered in cobwebs leaning over a telephone. And it was a statement, it was a jab, it was a gesture, it was a joke, all the above at the same time. And so I responded to him, and I just simply said, touche, I'll call you next week. So we got home from CNS 24, and on Thursday, I picked the phone up that morning and I called Jason. I wanted to talk to him about CNS, but I needed I needed a phone number of someone I knew he had the number that I needed to talk to about CNS 25. And he called me back an hour later, and he said, "Hey, Robbie," he said, "I got your voicemail." He said, "I'm texting you that number right now." He said, "But I'll do you one better." He said, "Tomorrow I get on an airplane for Seattle. And when we land, I'll be with this individual and I'll tell him exactly why you're calling, because we're heading out on a Gaither cruise." And um, we talked about CNS 25. I booked them for a concert. They wanted to come the day of the concert. They wanted to be there and teach all day. They wanted to pour into our students. They wanted to stay, do the concert that night. They wanted to stay over the next day. And I'm like, "Jason, I don't even have dates yet." He said, "Robbie, it doesn't matter. You just, when you get dates, you call me, and we'll make it happen." But the takeaway from that phone call, and probably the biggest memory, he spent we were on the phone an hour and 21 minutes. He spent about 45, 50 minutes just pouring into me, where the relationship started as I, the teacher, and him, the student. It was reversed. And that's who Jason Clark was. He just wanted to pour into people. And if God allowed him to achieve something or reach a mark or a milestone within his career or his ministry, he wanted to pass that information along to other people. And I just straight up told him, I said, "Jason, I can't afford to pay you what this information is valued at." And he's like, "Robbie, that's not what this is about." He said, "You've poured into me, and it's my chance to give back." So lots of memories, lots of special memories. I think the other thing was with Kelly, um, Todd. I love Todd. Todd. Um, so many funny things with Todd. I'm not going to share on here, Andrew. I'm just not going to do it. But Kelly, Kelly and I became close several years back. Jeff Stice went through what he publicly called his meltdown, and there was a season through that Jeff, in his testimony, I'm not sharing anything. He went to a ministerial retreat center to get the help that he needed, and it was off the grid. And Kelly and I talked every other day for about 6 months trying to find Jeff. She thought I would know where he was. I thought she would know where he was. And what was funny, I'll never forget, I got a phone call one day, and it was Kelly. I answered it, and she said, "Robbie, I have found him. I hired a private detective and I found Jeff." It was just funny the way that it came across. But then when Jeff was had fallen, had COVID, and was sick right before he passed, we were organizing nights of prayer here on Facebook for Jeff. And I worked hand in hand through CNS with Kelly to make those nights happen. And Andrew, we were getting 45. One night we had 56,000 people view those nights of prayer for Jeff. And what I know about the Nealons, and what I know about that service that I attended last Tuesday, um, there was a spirit of unity, and still is, on that name. And I watched them over and over bring people together. And that's what I experienced at their homegoing service on Thursday, was just such a atmosphere of unity and love and peace and comfort in that room that day. So lots of takeaways, but there's just a few.
So, for a student who has never experienced the Charles Novell School of Music, what can you describe that experience as?
Mm, Easiest, toughest question I'm ever asked, Andrew. I tell students every year, I've been to 55 of these. I've grown up in this. Been running it now. My dad passed in 20, but even prior to that, with his health, I've been running and directing the school for about 11 years. The hardest thing for me to do is to describe the experience, because it's something you have to experience. But well, the way our students explain the school, yes, it's musical learning. That's what we are. We're a school of music, but it's relational. We talked offline before we started. A lot of this is, Andrew, is relations, and it's not just who you know, but God allows relationships to come into your life. Then if you are faithful and obedient, Isaiah 119, if you're willing and obedient, if you will cultivate those relationships and work on those and strengthen those and protect those, then it's not politics, it's all relational. God can use that to open different doors for you. So there's a relational side of what we do. that opens the door. We had 125 students there. Instantly, those students have 124 other now connections of where they can go and minister. So it's a relational side. Students explain it as camp meeting or a spiritual renewal week for them. We book in the day. We start with devotions every morning at 8 o'clock, and then we have evening concerts every night. And those concerts, I'm a planner, I'm an organizer. We're already off and running planning CNS 25, but the first student that is already registered for CNS 25 is the Holy Spirit. We allow the Holy Spirit to come in and change that plan and change whatever he needs to do. We had 2 of those evening concerts that ended with altar calls this past July 14th through the 20th. And man, it's a place where you're going to get musical learning, but you're going to get direction of how to listen and how to follow God, not only in your life and your music, but definitely in your ministry.
So, just in case our viewers and listeners would want to donate, won't you share with them about the scholarships?
Yeah, we have great ways and opportunities for people to come along beside us and partner. We have different scholarship funds that we have set up to assist students in attending a CNS. We have the first one is our Charles Novell Legacy Scholarship, and that's in honor of my dad. My dad put 58 years of his time and effort and heart into this school. And through those years, man, we met people like Dean Hoppers and Gary Shepherds and Ivan Parkers. And whew, I could go on and on and on. Jason Clark's, I just shared that. So the Charles Novell Scholarship is just a way that what we take that money that comes in and we try to spread that out and make it go a little further. Those are like partial scholarships that we offer students towards the main tuition. Then we have the Jeff Stice Impact Scholarship. And if you knew Jeff, the name is fitting because that's what Jeff did. He made an impact on gospel music, but he made an impact on every life that God allowed him to touch. So our Jeff Stice Impact Scholarships are specifically set aside for young people. There is no age limit at CNS. We had a 9-year-old this year and we had an 86-year-old this year, but those Jeff Stice scholarships are for our younger up to about 25. And these are people that we believe are going to make an impact. There are 2 young men that have been with us for a couple years now. We're going to hear their names in gospel music very, very soon. They're going to make that type of impact. So the Jeff Stice scholarships are set aside for those type of people. And then we had a former student, Katie Roberts, and Katie was an accomplished pianist. She was a student of my dad's, and we tragically lost her and her mother in an auto accident. And at that time, we established the Katie Roberts Memorial Scholarship, and we try to gear that scholarship towards a gifted pianist because that's who she was. So all 3 of those scholarships, we open registration September the 1st, and also in September we're going to open up the scholarship funds for contributions. And it's very, very simple on our website, which is www.cnsmusic.com. There's a tab that says scholarships, and all those scholarships I just talked about are explained and broke down. And there's very simply, there's a donate button, and any gift that you give will go to bless the lives of future generations. When JD gave my dad the school, he said, Charles, just do this for me on a promise. He didn't sell the school to my dad. He didn't charge him a dime. He just gave the school to my dad. But he said, Charles, do it on the promise that you'll keep raising up the next generation of singers, musicians, and songwriters. And that's our focus at CNS. And when I took the keys in January 17th of 2020, all I'm doing is trying to, Andrew, move my dad's vision forward and keep honoring that promise that he made to JD Sumner in 1978. We're just trying to build up the next generations of singers, musicians, and songwriters.
Well, Rob, it has been an honor talking to you. Thanks so much for coming on Fake Chats. God bless you, brother.
God bless you. Thank you so much, Andrew.